I found the group chat by accident. My best friend Marcus left his iPad on my coffee table while we were having lunch, and when a notification pinged, I glanced over. The message preview read, "How much longer do you think she'll last before she figures it out?" And below it, "I'm betting another month. She's pretty oblivious." My hand froze mid-bite of my sandwich. I shouldn't have looked. I know I shouldn't have looked. But something in my gut twisted, and I opened the full conversation. What I found destroyed me piece by piece with every message I scrolled through. The bet was real. All of them, Marcus, Jamie, Devin, Sophie, and Tyler, had literally gambled money on how long they could maintain our friendship before I caught on to the fact that they didn't actually like me. They'd been documenting my annoying habits. They'd been rating my desperation on a scale. They'd been laughing at how hard I tried to fit in, how much I invested in friendships that were, apparently, nothing but a joke to them. The earliest message was from 6 months ago. 6 months. That entire time, I thought we were genuine. I thought these were the people I'd call at 3 a.m. if my life fell apart. I thought they loved me. Instead, they'd been running a social experiment to see how long I'd tolerate their fake affection before I realized the truth. I remember putting the iPad down with trembling hands. I remember sitting on that couch, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process that the 5 people I trusted most had spent half a year mocking me. The sandwich I'd been eating suddenly felt like ash in my mouth. I didn't say anything to Marcus that day. I couldn't. If I'd opened my mouth, I would have screamed or cried or both. So I smiled and made an excuse about having an early meeting, and I drove home in a daze. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for an hour, reading the messages over and over, looking for some explanation that would make sense of this, looking for some proof that I'd misunderstood. But there was no misunderstanding. One message from Jamie read, "She literally follows us around like a lost puppy. It's actually kind of sad." Another from Sophie, "I can't believe she thinks we actually want to hang out with her." And from Tyler, "The bet was a mistake. We should have just stopped inviting her, but the money makes it easier to pretend." Easier to pretend. As if our friendship was a performance they were being paid to give. As if my affection, my loyalty, my time, all of it, was just currency to be wagered and won. I called my mom that night. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't find the words. But I told her I needed to take some time away from my friends. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Do what you need to do, sweetheart. I love you." And I broke down crying because I realized my mother loved me more authentically than my best friends ever could. For 3 days, I didn't respond to any of their messages. They texted asking why I was being weird, why I wasn't answering, if I was okay. The irony was suffocating. They were pretending to care, probably worried that I'd figured out their secret. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a response. Then I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I created a fake profile and texted them as a journalist, writing about fake friendships and social experiments. I wanted to see if they'd confess, if they'd come clean under the pressure of potential exposure. Within minutes, they all panicked and started asking what this was about, denying everything, claiming it was a stupid joke that had gone too far. So they knew it was wrong. They'd known all along that what they were doing was cruel, and they'd done it anyway. Before we continue, we would like to thank all of you who support us by subscribing, liking, and sharing our content. The only appreciation we ask of you is that you subscribe, like, and share this video if you are not yet one of our subscribers. Thank you. I scheduled a meeting with all 5 of them at a coffee shop. When they arrived, their faces told me everything. They knew I knew. Marcus's jaw was clenched. Sophie looked like she might throw up. Jamie tried to smile as if a smile could undo 6 months of betrayal. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady even though my insides were crumbling. "What do you mean?" Devin tried, but his lie was transparent. "The bet, how long were you planning to keep it going?" The silence was deafening. Then Marcus spoke. "Look, it started as a joke. We were drunk and someone said you were clingy and Tyler said we should make a bet about how long we could actually tolerate hanging out with you before we got tired of pretending. We never thought I'd find out," I finished, or never thought I'd care. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," Sophie said, and she looked genuinely remorseful. But remorse doesn't erase months of mockery. Remorse does not take back the time I invested in people who were counting down the days until they could justify abandoning me. "You meant exactly for it to go this far," I said. "You kept going because you were having fun, because making me the punchline of your joke was entertaining, because my pain was worth money to you." I stood up and walked out of that coffee shop. I didn't give them a chance to apologize or explain or defend themselves. I didn't owe them that. The aftermath of that confrontation was paradoxically both devastating and clarifying. On one hand, I'd lost my entire social circle in a matter of days. On the other hand, I'd lost nothing real, because what I'd thought I had was never real to begin with. I blocked all 5 of them on every platform. I didn't read their follow-up messages or explanations. I didn't engage with their attempts to apologize, because I'd learned something crucial. People who betray you this deeply don't deserve the energy of your forgiveness. They don't deserve the labor of your healing on their behalf. But I did have to heal. I had to process the fact that I'd fundamentally misread 5 relationships. I'd thought I was good at reading people, good at building connections, good at friendship, and I was apparently none of those things. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Chen, and she helped me understand something that shifted my entire perspective. What they did says nothing about your worth, she told me in our first session. It says everything about theirs. I'd been so focused on what their betrayal meant about me that I hadn't stopped to consider what it meant about them. These were adults who'd spent half a year deliberately deceiving someone who trusted them. These were people so empty inside that they'd needed to feed on someone else's pain to feel anything. These were fundamentally broken people, and I'd internalized their brokenness as my own failure. Before we continue, we would like to thank all of you who support us by subscribing, liking, and sharing our content. The only appreciation we ask of you is that you subscribe, like, and share this video if you are not yet one of our subscribers. Thank you. I took a month off work. I didn't leave my house much. I read books, I journaled. I cried in the shower where no one could hear me. And slowly, something shifted. The shame I'd been carrying, the sense that I was fundamentally unlovable, started to crack. I reached out to my parents, to my cousins, to a few colleagues I'd been friendly with, but had never made time for because I was too invested in my core friend group. And you know what I discovered? People actually liked me. Not in a performative way, not for a bet. They just genuinely enjoyed my company. My cousin Sarah invited me to a dinner party. I was terrified that these people would secretly hate me, that there was something inherently wrong with me that everyone else could see but I couldn't. But I went. And it was wonderful. And no one was keeping score. 2 months after cutting off my friend group, I was sitting at Sarah's kitchen table when she asked me directly, "Do you want to talk about what happened with Marcus and the others?" Apparently, news travels fast. I told her everything, and she listened without judgment, then said something that I needed to hear. "You know what I see when I look at you? Someone who loves deeply, who shows up for people, who cares. Those are the things that made you vulnerable to their cruelty, but those are also your greatest strengths." I started writing about what happened, not to shame them, though God knows they deserved it, but to process my own experience. I wrote about the specific moments I'd trusted them, the inside jokes that suddenly felt like mockery, the times I'd been genuinely excited to see them, and they'd been secretly counting down the hours. And then I did something radical. I shared my story. I posted about it on Reddit. I told friends. I didn't hide it or pretend it hadn't happened, because I realized that my shame about their betrayal was allowing them to continue controlling my narrative. By staying silent, I was giving them power over my story. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out to tell me they'd experienced something similar. Women who'd been excluded from friend groups, people who'd discovered they were the butt of an ongoing joke, people who'd realized their friends had been cruel the entire time. We weren't alone in this experience. This was a pattern, and that somehow made it both more painful and less personal. 7 months after the confrontation, I ran into Marcus at a grocery store. He looked terrible, thin, hollow, like his own life had collapsed in the interim. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly, I just felt sad. Sad that someone I'd cared about had chosen cruelty over connection. Sad that he'd apparently been so miserable that he'd needed to make me miserable too. He tried to approach me, tried to apologize again, but I just shook my head and walked past him. I didn't need his apology. I'd already given myself the one that mattered. I'd forgiven myself for trusting the wrong people. A year later, I had a completely different friend group. Not huge, just a few genuine people who valued honesty and kindness. Sarah became my best friend. I met other people through therapy groups and volunteer work and just living my life authentically, instead of desperately trying to fit into a mold that wasn't designed for me. I learned that friendship isn't about how long you've known someone or how much time you invest in them. It's about how they make you feel about yourself. It's about whether they choose you when no one's watching. It's about whether your presence in their life adds something or takes something away. The 5 people I'd called my best friends had chosen to take. They'd taken my trust, my time, my emotional energy, and they'd given nothing authentic in return. But I'd learned from it. I'd learned to be more discerning. I'd learned to trust my gut when something feels off. I'd learned that sometimes losing everyone is actually the beginning of finding yourself. Sometimes the hardest goodbyes are the ones to people we thought would be in our lives forever. But sometimes those goodbyes are necessary. Sometimes they're the most loving thing we can do for ourselves. If you're in a friendship that makes you question your worth, that makes you feel like you're performing rather than being, that makes you smaller instead of bigger, you have permission to walk away. You don't need a dramatic revelation. You don't need them to admit they were wrong. You just need to trust yourself enough to know that you deserve better. And you do. You absolutely do.